Hey friends, this video is going to cover day one of the previews for the Warhammer 40k Commander pre-constructed decks. We got a bunch of brand new legendary creatures to talk about and a couple bonus cards as well. But before we jump into the cards, two quick reminders. First, if you want to pre-order these brand new Warhammer 40k pre-constructed decks, you can head on over to our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish, and be sure to ask for a scoop sticker in your order notes. And number two, be sure to like and subscribe if you like this sort of content. Every other day of the week is going to feature one pre-constructed deck list full reveal, and we're going to have a video covering each deck list as they are published. So be sure to come back to this channel every single day to see a full breakdown of all the brand new cards coming out. Alright, with that out of the way, let's kick things off with the first card on our list. This is from the Chaos Marine deck. It's not the face card, it is the secondary commander that you can choose. This is Be'lakor the Dark Master. It's a Grixis 6-mana 6/5 Demon Noble with flying and has two abilities. First, Prince of Chaos. When it enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of demons you control. And then its second ability is Lord of Torment. Whenever another demon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So this is obviously a demon tribal leader. When it enters the battlefield, you're going to be drawing a bunch of cards, at least one because it is a demon. And then whenever another demon enters the battlefield afterwards, you're going to be dealing damage equal to its power. And typically speaking, demons have very high power, usually 5 or 6 power. So there's going to be a lot of damage going to take out opposing creatures or going to opponents' faces to finish them off. So what are we going to be doing with Be'lakor? Well, like I said, this is going to be Demon Tribal. In the past, if you wanted to go Demon Tribal, there were a couple different options. The classic option would be Kaalia of the Vast. Demons are usually quite expensive, high mana value, so Kaalia is a great way of cheating them into play. And then there's fairly more recently, Rakdos, a Showstopper, which is a cool asymmetrical board wipe if you are in Demon Tribal. But out of all these options, I honestly think that Be'lakor is going to be the most interesting version. There's not a lot of new blue demons to add to Be'lakor, but I think the two abilities, first being able to draw a bunch of cards, and second being able to have targeted removal or targeted finisher ability, burn ability in the command zone is really powerful, and I personally like this a lot more than Kaalia or Rakdos. So this is going to be my personal go-to suggestion for Demon Tribal going forward. And what else can you do with a Be'lakor Demon Tribal deck? Well, I think the most interesting thing is probably going to be having Gyruda as your companion. Gyruda, for people who don't know, can be your companion if your starting deck contains only cards with even converted mana cost. So, 6 mana value with Be'lakor is working perfectly with Gyruda. And then you could do basically Gyruda things where you're copying Gyruda a bunch of times. So you constantly copy Gyruda and reanimate more creatures, hopefully extra clones that you're milling with Gyruda, and keep going and going with Sakashima and Spark Double, which get around even the legendary rule. And this is going to trigger Be'lakor a bunch of times as well as you're doing this, because Gyruda is also a demon. So every single time Gyruda's entering the battlefield, you're doming somebody for 6, and then when you copy Gyruda again, you're doming somebody else for 6 again. And this can get absolutely bonkers, absolutely insane. And then you can just fill the rest of the deck with sweet demons as well. So I think Be'lakor with Gyruda as a companion spice is going to be super fun to play. All right, moving on, we have a face commander. This is going to be the face of the Stardies deck, the Esper deck. This is Inquisitor Greyfax. This is an Esper commander, 4 mana, 3/3, legendary creature, human Inquisitor with vigilance and 2 abilities. First one is Unquestionable Wisdom. Other creatures you control get +1/+0 and have vigilance. And the second ability is Hunt for Heresy. You can pay 1 and tap her to tap target creature an opponent controls and investigate. So one part of it is a little bit of an anthem effect. It gives your creatures a little bit of a power boost and vigilance, which is great for making sure you don't get hit on the crackback. And the second ability is tapping down opposing potential blockers or potential attackers and investigating, making some clue tokens, making some rather slow card advantage at the same time to fairly okay abilities, but there's a lot of build around here. So what do I expect to do with Inquisitor? Well, first, you can build a tap-untap style deck. You can take advantage of the fact that you can attack first with Inquisitor Greyfax's Vigilance ability. So you can attack with your tap ability creatures, and then afterwards tap them for value. And you can take advantage of this a couple different ways. First of all, Drum Bellower can untap all your creatures on every single person's turn. So you can actually get multiple activations per turn cycle with Inquisitor Greyfax. You can tap her on your turn, tap something down, investigate, untap all your creatures again on an opponent's turn, keep doing it. And also when you're tapping down creatures, you can draw cards off Verity's Circle. And also you're making clue tokens, which are artifacts. So if you want to go a little bit more high power, you can throw in Urza Lord High Artificer, and suddenly all those clue tokens that you have sitting around on the battlefield are now mana rocks to tap for blue, which is also quite powerful and fun. All right, moving on, we have the secondary commander from the Esper deck, Marneus Calgar. This is a 5-mana Esper commander, and this one I think is much more potent, much more powerful than the face commander. This is a 3/5 legendary creature, Astartes Warrior with double strike and 2 abilities. Master Tactician says whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And keep in mind this says tokens, not just creature tokens, so any type of tokens will work. And then the second ability is Chapter Master. You can pay 6 mana to create 2/2/2 white Astartes Warrior creature tokens with Vigilance. Now, the second ability is very strong in terms of combo potential. Like, if you have infinite mana, you can make infinite tokens. That's great. And it can go for infinite loops. But the Master Tactician ability, the first ability here, is just really strong. Like I said, you don't have to make just creature tokens to draw cards. You can draw cards off, say, treasure tokens as well. So what are we doing with this? Again, Smothering Time, white staple, one of the strongest cards in Commander, makes a lot of tokens and makes them one at a time, which is an important part. So every single Smothering Time trigger is going to draw you a card. And Marneus also basically combos with a ham sandwich. One way you can combo off with Marneus is you can pair him with Nadir Kraken and Ashnod's Altar. Whenever you draw a card with the Kraken out, you can pay 1, and if you do, you put a counter on the Kraken and you create a 1/1 blue tentacle creature token. So when you pay 1 mana, you can make a token and put a counter on the Kraken, and then you're going to draw a card off of Calgar. And when you draw a card off Calgar, you're going to trigger the Kraken again. And you can sacrifice the tentacle creature token that he made off the Kraken to Ashnod's Altar to pay for the extra 1 the next time. And this basically lets you generate infinite colorless mana, put infinite +1/+1 counters on the Nadir Kraken, and basically like draw your entire deck in the process, which is really, really good. Probably will win you the game pretty easily at that point. All right, so moving on, we have the face commander of the Tyranid Swarm deck, I believe. This is the Swarmlord. It's a teamer deck, all based on these Tyranids. It's a 6-mana teamer creature, legendary creature Tyranid, 5/5 with 2 abilities. First ability is Rapid Regeneration. The Swarmlord enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. And its second ability is whenever a creature you control dies with a counter on it, you draw a card. So this one, when it enters the battlefield, the first time you cast it, it's going to be a 5/5 with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So it's going to be immediately a 7/7. And when it dies, or any other creature you control with a counter on it dies, you're drawing cards. That's all right. Not super interesting to me for 6 mana. It feels a little bit overcosted, but you're going to see a recurring theme here where I actually like the secondary commanders a lot more than the face commanders of these pre-constructed decks. So the Swarmlord, what are we going to be doing with it? I was thinking about just like making a +1/+1 counter deck, we've seen this a bunch of like Atraxa decks, for example, where you go for +1/+1 counters as your main theme. Swarmlord is going to do the same thing, I think. The Great Henge is a great way of putting counters on all your creatures, so whenever any of them die, you're going to be drawing cards. You can proliferate very easily with cards like Evolution Sage, and you can have like some sort of payoffs to +1/+1 counters as well, outside of just the Swarmlord. You don't have to let them die to draw cards, for example, with Inspiring Call. You can make them all indestructible and then draw cards off them as well. So there's stuff you can do here, and it is going to be a pretty decent deck. It just doesn't it doesn't really interest me as much as the secondary commander that I like very much more, which is Magus, Lucea, Kane. This is also the Temur commander from the same deck. It's 4 mana instead of 6, which I like a lot more, for a 1/1 legendary creature, Human Tyranid Wizard, and it has 2 abilities. First ability is Spiritual Leader. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and its second ability is Psychic Stimulus. You tap it, add 2 colorless mana. When you next activate a spell with X in its mana cost, or activate an ability with X in its activation cost this turn, you copy that spell or ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So the first ability, putting some counters on stuff, is great for a +1/+1 counters matters deck like the Tyranid Swarm is going to work very well with Swarmlord and other +1/+1 counter payoffs. But the second ability is where the real spice is to me. It's a pretty good mana rock, like it taps for 2, which is pretty decent for a 4-drop. But the fact that when you're casting a spell or an ability with X in it, you get to copy it is going to be incredibly mana efficient, incredibly powerful, a great value engine. So what are we going to be copying with it? Well, there's another card that got previewed today from the same deck, and we can see where Magus is going to work really well. The Magus is going to work really well. Cards like Broodlord, this is an X 3 and a green, so 4 mana minimum, and then X on top of it. For a 3/3 Tyranid that has Ravenous, which is a new keyword from the pre-constructed deck, this creature enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. If X is 5 or more, draw a card when it enters the battlefield. And it has another ability, Brood Telepathy. When Broodlord enters the battlefield, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of other creatures you control. So obviously, you don't really want to pay this for 4. You want to dump some mana into that X cost, distribute some extra counters on your other creatures, set up that +1/+1 counter theme. But if you tap Magus, you add 2 mana so to help pay for the Broodlord, but also if you cast the Broodlord immediately after tapping the Magus, you get 2 Broodlords, which is absolutely fantastic value. It's going to be really, really fun, and that's like the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be powerful green staples that immediately came to mind, Genesis Wave and Finale of Devastation. Genesis Wave just like vomits out permanents from the top of your library. Finale of Devastation finds basically any creature from your library or your graveyard, and if you pay 10 or more mana, you just win the game, essentially. You just like give all your creatures +X in haste, and you go to town and you win. I think Magus is going to be a great commander, not just for the Tyranid Swarm precon, but I'm super excited to brew around her for like an X-Tribal style deck. You're going to take advantage of stuff like Genesis Wave, Finale of Devastation, basically any powerful X spell, and Magus is going to make it just 10 times better. Just super fun, super good commander. So we got a couple more cards from the Tyranid deck, and another legendary creature. This one's monocolor. This is Old One-Eye. This is a 6 mana green 6/6 legendary creature Tyranid with trample, and it says other creatures you control have trample. When it enters the battlefield, create a 5/5 green Tyranid creature token, and it has fast healing. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may discard 2 cards. If you do, return Old One-Eye from your graveyard to your hand. So it's a big beater. It basically puts 11 power on the battlefield with trample, and it has a way of recurring itself from the graveyard back to your hand and act as a discard outlet. Really cool. So 6 mana is a lot for what it's doing, but it has some really unique abilities. So what are we going to do with Old One-Eye? I think this is going to be one of those cards you put in the 99 and not your commander. I feel like green is going to be super limiting for what it's trying to do here, but I think it has potential in a couple different decks. First, I like it in Gyrid Conclave Exile because this is a populate deck. It likes to copy big ol' creature tokens, and Old One-Eye comes with a 5/5 creature token, which is on the big side, so it's a great populate target for Gyrid. It's also an enter the battlefield trigger, so you have Deadeye Navigator, for example, as a way to constantly blink Old One-Eye and just constantly generate more and more 5/5 creature tokens each time you're blinking him. Also, its fast healing ability is a interesting discard outlet. So if you are in some sort of like a green madness deck, I don't know which style of deck that would be because the only madness commanders I think are Rakdos. But if you have green in your deck, you can do neat little things such as discarding returning it back to your hand and discarding some madness cards like Shadowgrange Archfiend, and then casting the Shadowgrange Archfiend for 3 mana instead of 7. So yeah, there's a lot of potential here, but I don't think it's going to be best as the commander, but more as spice in the 99. Moving on, we have another legendary creature from the Tyranid deck. This is Deathleaper Terror Weapon. This is a Gruul commander, 2 and a red and a green. For a 3/3 legendary creature Tyranid, it has flash, haste, and flesh hooks. Creatures you control that enter the battlefield this turn have double strike. So double strike is a very powerful ability. 4 mana to give your team double strike, or at least the ones that enter the battlefield this turn double strike, is a really good anthem effect and it can push lethal damage through. And what this wants really badly to do is basically work with haste tribal. So you can build a deck that is all about haste. So all the creatures that enter the battlefield a turn, they have double strike when they enter the battlefield, and then you attack immediately and benefit from the double strike. So haste is absolutely required if you really want to take advantage of Deathleaper. And what else are you going to be doing with him? I think he works really well when paired with, for example, Xenagos, God of Revels. Xenagos gives all your creatures haste, doubles their power. So they double their power, and then double strike works really well when you're doubling the power. So you can have like a 5/5 enter the battlefield. It becomes a 10/10 with haste with Xenagos, and then it hits with double strike because of Deathleaper. Very powerful. And you can also slot Deathleaper in other commanders that, run with a lot of hasty creatures. Ognis is another sort of haste tribal style deck where if you're attacking with creatures with haste, you make treasure tokens. Deathleaper also has haste, so works really well there. And Henzi Toolbox Torre is all about blitzing out hasty creatures that are going to immediately die, and they're usually big overcosted threats that you're blitzing in for cheaper. So they usually have a lot of power with them, and Double Strike is really nice there too. So I think Deathleaper is going to work probably best in the 99 of decks, but it can also be a powerful commander. We also got 2 of the commanders from the Necron deck. The first one, which I think is going to be the face commander, is Szarekh the Silent King. This is a 4 mana mono black 3/4 legendary artifact creature Necron with flying, and it has an ability, My Will Be Done. Whenever it attacks, mill 3 cards. You may put an artifact creature card or vehicle card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. So this deck is mono black self-mill artifacts, which is a fairly unique archetype, especially in Commander where there's just not that much support. Artifacts are primary red and blue. So having mono black artifacts is a cool new direction that hasn't really been fleshed out before, pardon the pun, because these are the artifact creatures. So it's really cool to see this Necron take of mono black artifacts and self-mill. So this commander, I think, is okay. It does the 2 things that the deck wants to be doing. First, it's milling itself because it's a reanimation deck, and it's card advantage every single time it attacks. You get to mill, and you get to put an artifact creature card or a vehicle card from the milled cards this way to your hand. Obviously, you have to be a little bit lucky that you're always going to be hitting an artifact creature or a vehicle card. It's not just any card from your graveyard, which makes me kind of about this card in general. The fact that it is going to be kind of inconsistent unless you have ways of manipulating the top cards of your library very easily. But if it is working properly, it is always going to be generating card advantage for you, which is nice. So what are we going to be doing with it? Well, I think you're going to be doing with Szarekh the same thing you're going to be doing with the other mono black artifact matters style decks. I did a budget commander a few years ago of King Makar the Gold Curse, which I think kind of has a lot of overlap here. It was made when Theros came out. The original Theros came out, I believe. And that was even before vehicles, but I did update it. And it became a lot stronger when vehicles came out in Kaladesh and everything. And this is an inspired creature, so it wants to be tapped. It doesn't really want to attack because It's just a 2/3, so it doesn't really survive combat so easily. But it works really well crewing vehicles, and then when it untaps, you have basically this repeatable, super powerful creature removal. You exile a creature and you make a gold token each time it untaps. Really, really strong. Works really well with like a vehicle style deck, which is what Szarekh kind of does as well. And I have dabbled with mono black artifacts before with the partners Armex and Keskit, and I think those are going to kind of work the same way as Szarekh is going to want to work with. I think the partners are going to be a little bit stronger than Szarekh as commanders, though. I probably want Szarekh in the 99 because I'm just still not really sure how consistent his ability is going to be. But if you can make him very consistent, then he is going to be pretty darn decent. Then there's another card in the precon, and like I said before, the non-face commanders I usually like a lot more, and I think this is going to be not the face commander as well. This is Imotekh the Stormlord. This is a 4-mana mono black 3/3 legendary artifact creature Necron, 2 abilities this time. Whenever one or more artifact cards leave your graveyard, create 2/2 black Necron Warrior artifact creature tokens and Grand Strategist. At the beginning of combat on your turn, another target artifact creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains menace until end of turn. So the first ability I think is going to be the stronger of the two. Basically having artifact cards leave your graveyard is pretty easy in Artifact Tribal because there's so many ways of recurring artifacts from your graveyard, even in mono black. So you're going to constantly be making 2/2 black artifact creature tokens each time you're doing that, which is a great token generator. It's like a Tormod on steroids for an artifact deck, which is really good. The second ability is okay. It's nice to have give your creatures menace and pump them up a little bit, and it's also great if you have combat triggered abilities, like if you have like a Sword of the Animist or something like that. You need to attack to get your attack triggers, your combat triggers, or whatever. This is a great way to make sure your creatures survive combat, so that's also really good too. But the first ability, the ability of making tokens, is really potent, and I like it quite a bit. So what are we going to be doing with Imotekh the Stormlord? Well, like I said, artifact decks have 1,000 ways of recurring artifact cards from your graveyard to trigger Imotekh like very consistently. Mirror Retriever is just one of many ways of doing that. Whenever it dies, you return another artifact card from a graveyard to your hand. So you just sacrifice it to like a Skull Clamp or whatever. You get an artifact card back to your hand, and then you make 2 more tokens with Imotekh, which are also artifacts, which work really well with the deck. Also, Imotekh does have some powerful combo abilities. If you have 2 artifacts, one in your hand, one in your graveyard, and you have Phyrexian Altar on the battlefield, which, yes, it's Phyrexian Altar, it combos with a ham sandwich, blah, blah, blah. I just wanted to show you that there are combos with Imotekh, all right? Don't be mad at me in the comment section. But basically, the way it works is if you have an artifact in your hand, one in your graveyard, if you have 2 artifact creatures, one in your hand, one in your graveyard, you could pay 1 black to basically swap them with Tortured Existence. You discard the artifact creature from your hand, put it into the graveyard, you return an artifact creature from your graveyard to your hand with Tortured Existence. When that happens, Imotekh triggers, you make 2 Necron Warriors that are also artifacts onto the battlefield. You can sacrifice one of the Necron Warriors to Phyrexian Altar for a black mana, and that will pay for the cost of Tortured Existence. And you just keep doing this over and over again. And this process is going to generate infinite warrior tokens and infinite black mana, and it's just a good time for all. So you're going to win the game somehow. Either a drain effect like a Blood Artist, or you just, attack. And that will work out fine too. Okay, moving on, we covered the legendary creatures. Now we're going to talk about the other spice that they showcased. And again, they showcased a bunch of cards from the Tyranid deck. So each precon comes with a brand new saga, kind of illustrating the history of the army. And the first one is the First Tyranid War. This is a 5-mana Temur saga. And the first chapter says you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If its mana cost contains X, it enters the battlefield with a number of counters on it equal to the lands you control. So Tyranids are all about +1/+1 counters, and they have that new keyword that comes with X on it. So this works really, really well with Tyranids, but it also works really, really well with like Hydras and other stuff that have X in their mana cost. And then the second and third chapter are double the number of each kind of counter on target creature you control, which is a great way of just like taking a creature with lots of counters on it, doubling it, sending it out for immense amounts of damage. It's pretty good saga. It's 5 mana. It's very much telegraphed, but that first chapter is really strong. Like, it can be really, really powerful and like a nice way to set up chapters 2 and 3 for sure. So not a bad card. Not the most exciting for me, but pretty strong. And then we got another card, Noise Marine, which is a 5 mana red 3/2 Astartes Warrior with Cascade and Sonic Blaster, which is basically just like Storm Flame Tongue Kavu. When it enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to the number of spells you've cast this turn to any target. So if you just cast Noise Marine as the first spell you cast on your turn, it's going to immediately Cascade, and it's going to cast a spell off that. And then when it enters the battlefield, it's going to deal at least 2 damage because you cast Noise Marine and you cast whatever the spell you cascaded into. So what are you going to be doing with this? I think this is a nice inclusion, probably in the Space Marine precon deck. I'm assuming there's synergies there with cascading and all that stuff and playing from cards from exile. But there are also other red commanders already with like Exile Matters and Cascading Matters. Prosper being one of them. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, you make a treasure token. And Belborca, all those cards that you are revealing from exile with Noise Marine when you're cascading works really well with Belborca because you will note the highest mana value out of all the cards you're exiling with the cascade. So if you have like, I don't know, a Draco or something, you can like just smack somebody for 16 with Belborca, or how much. I think Draco is 16. I'm not gonna look it up right now. Let me know in the comments. I think it's 16. So yeah, I think Cascade is gonna work really well with Exile Matters and whatever the precon is gonna be bringing to the table. And those are new cards from day 1 of the Warhammer 40k Commander precon decks. There's going to be a full precon deck reveal every single day of the week. So be sure to come back tomorrow when I do a full precon analysis as soon as the first deck list is revealed. Thanks for watching, and until next time, friends. See ya!